I still remember the night I met Jack. It was at a charity gala in downtown Los Angeles, an event meant to raise funds for underprivileged children. I was there, as usual, working my magic as a jacketing consultant, helping clients find the perfect outfits for such occasions. The atmosphere was electric, filled with elegant gowns and dapper suits, and amidst all the glitz, Jack stood out like a beacon of charm. He had this disarming smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We struck up a conversation near the silent auction tables, and though we had different views on religion, something that usually sets the tone for future disagreements, Jack assured me it wouldn't be an issue. He was charismatic and seemed genuinely interested in my life. I found myself laughing more that night than I had in a long time. Our relationship blossomed quickly after that. Jack was a successful entrepreneur, known for his business acumen, and he was always full of stories about his work. It was clear he was driven and passionate, qualities I admired. After a year of dating, we decided to take the plunge and get married. Jack's family seemed to be as perfect as he was, and their acceptance meant a lot to me. Jack's father, Henry, was a prominent figure in Los Angeles. At 68, he had achieved tremendous success as the CEO of a well-known nonprofit organization. Henry was a man of principles, strict yet fair. His leadership had not only elevated the nonprofit's profile but had also impacted many lives positively. Despite his formidable reputation, he was warm and welcoming when I first met him. Jack's mother, Margaret, was more reserved. At 65, she had a cautious nature, wary of who Jack brought home. But she was never unkind, just protective. I could tell she had high expectations, and while she didn't openly express her approval, I could sense her grudging acceptance. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. Jack and I settled into a comfortable rhythm, balancing our busy careers and personal lives. We had a beautiful home in Beverly Hills, a gift from Jack's family, and our social life was vibrant, filled with events and gatherings. Then, everything changed. Henry's sudden death was a jolt to all of us. I remember the day vividly. Jack had come home looking more solemn than I'd ever seen him. Henry's death was not just a personal loss. It meant a significant shift in the family dynamics, especially in Jack's life. I was expecting Jack to grieve deeply, to be consumed by the loss of his father. Instead, what I saw was troubling. He started coming home late, his eyes bloodshot and reeking of alcohol. He became distant and indifferent, not just towards me, but towards everything that once mattered. At first, I thought it was just his way of coping with the grief, a phase that would pass. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that something was fundamentally wrong. One evening, after yet another late night, I confronted him. "Jack, what's going on with you? You're not yourself," I said, my voice trembling with concern. He looked at me with a vacant expression. "Angela, I'm fine. Just need some time to myself," he replied, his tone dismissive. But I knew something was off. Jack's brother, Steve, who managed the family business, had started to show concern. He and his wife, Jessica, who had become a good friend of mine, were the only ones who seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. Steve pulled me aside one day at a family gathering. "Angela, you need to know something," he said, his face lined with worry. "Jack isn't handling this well. I've noticed he's been drinking heavily, and he doesn't seem to care about anything anymore. It's like he's relieved Henry is gone." I was taken aback. Relieved? But why would he feel that way? Steve shook his head. "I don't know, but it's as if he's freed from something. I'm worried about what's happening to him, and I think you should be too." The gravity of Steve's words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack's erratic behavior was more than just a reaction to grief. There was an unsettling shift in him, a change that was beyond the usual response to loss. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but replay the events in my mind. Jack's behavior, his indifference, Steve's revelation, it all pointed to something deeper, something I hadn't yet fully grasped. The man I had married, who had once been so charming and sincere, was now a stranger to me. And as the days passed, I feared that the foundation of our relationship, once built on trust and love, was crumbling faster than I could comprehend. The weeks after Henry's funeral were a blur of tension and confusion. I tried to keep our life as normal as possible, but Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic. I had hoped that time would heal his wounds, but it seemed to have done the opposite. Our once warm home now felt like a battlefield. One evening, while we were having dinner, Jack's phone buzzed incessantly. He ignored it at first, but eventually his frustration got the better of him. He snatched the phone off the table and stormed out of the room, leaving me to finish my meal in silence. I could hear muffled voices from the other room, but I couldn't make out what was being said. When Jack returned, he looked more agitated than ever. "I've had enough of this," he muttered, slamming his phone on the table. "I need some space." I tried to approach him gently. "Jack, talk to me. What's going on? You can't just shut me out." He glared at me. "It's not about you, Angela. It's everything. I just need to figure things out on my own." His words stung, but I didn't push further. Instead, I sought solace in conversations with Jessica. We'd become close friends over the past year, and she had always been a calming presence. I confided in her about my growing concerns. "Jessica, I'm worried," I said one day over coffee. "Jack's behavior is out of control. He's drinking heavily, and he's so distant. It's like he's a different person." Jessica's eyes widened with concern. "Angela, you're not alone in feeling this way. Steve and I have both noticed it. There's something really wrong with him." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. Jessica hesitated before speaking. "Steve mentioned that Jack's been spending money recklessly. The foundation's funds, Jack's been using them for personal expenses. And I've heard rumors about him seeing escorts." My heart sank. "Is that true? How could he do that?" Jessica nodded. "I'm afraid so. It's like he's spiraling out of control. And I'm worried about what this means for you." The betrayal cut deep. I felt a wave of nausea as I tried to process what Jessica had just revealed. Jack's father had dedicated his life to the nonprofit, and now Jack was tarnishing that legacy. How could someone so committed to helping others be so selfish? That evening, I confronted Jack again. "I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Steve told me about the misuse of the foundation's funds. And I've heard about the escorts." Jack's face turned pale. "Angela, Don't," I interrupted. "Just don't. I can't believe you would betray everything your father worked for. And you didn't even have the decency to be honest with me." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry. I thought I could handle it all. I didn't want to burden you with my problems." "Burden me?" I exclaimed. "You're tearing our lives apart. I'm married to someone who's not only betraying his family's legacy, but also using me as a cover for his deceit." Jack slumped into a chair, his shoulders drooping. "I'm sorry," he repeated, but his apology felt hollow. As the days passed, the rift between us widened. Jack's attempts to patch things up were feeble at best. He would come home with flowers or empty promises, but his actions spoke louder than words. The more he tried to win me back, the clearer it became that his motives were entirely self-serving. One afternoon, as I was packing up some of our things, Steve stopped by to check on me. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. "It's been hell," I admitted. "I don't know how to move forward from this. Jack's behavior is out of control, and I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare." Steve sighed. "Angela, I wish there was something more I could do. I'm afraid Jack's problems run deeper than just the recent events. There's a lot of unresolved anger and resentment." "I know," I said. "But it's not just about Jack anymore. It's about what's best for me, and I don't see a future with him the way things are." Steve nodded sympathetically. "You deserve better, Angela. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing when to walk away." I had hoped that Steve's words would bring me some clarity, but they only reinforced the growing certainty that my marriage was beyond repair. The man I had once loved and admired was now a stranger, someone who had manipulated and betrayed me. The illusion of our perfect life had shattered, leaving nothing but the fragments of a broken relationship. As I stared out the window, watching the sunset over Los Angeles, I knew that my next steps would be crucial. The decision to leave was looming, but the thought of facing the truth about Jack's motivations and the impact on my own future was daunting. I was standing at a crossroads, and the road ahead was uncertain. Little did I know that the revelations and choices that awaited would push me to the edge and force me to confront not just Jack's darkness, but my own resolve to reclaim my life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and heartache. Despite Jack's attempts to smooth things over with grand gestures, I couldn't ignore the unsettling truth about his actions. Our once hopeful future was now clouded by his deceit and betrayal. It was early one morning when Steve called me. "Angela, we need to talk," he said, his voice serious. "I've set up a meeting with a family lawyer. There are some important matters we need to discuss." My heart raced as I made my way to the lawyer's office in Beverly Hills. The opulent surroundings contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside me. Steve and Jessica were already there when I arrived, their faces etched with concern. "Angela, thank you for coming," the lawyer, Mr. Harris, began as I took a seat. "We need to go over the details of Henry's will and the implications for you and Jack." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. Mr. Harris pulled out a thick file and began flipping through it. "As you know, Henry left behind a considerable estate. There's the family foundation, which Jack is heavily involved with, and then there's the inheritance." The mention of the inheritance caught my attention. I'd heard rumors about a substantial amount, but the specifics had never been clear. "Jack's inheritance is conditional," Mr. Harris continued. "He stands to inherit $17 million, but only if his marriage to you lasts 6 years. If the marriage ends before that, he forfeits the entire amount." I stared at Mr. Harris in shock. "So, Jack's been staying with me just to secure this money?" Mr. Harris nodded. "It appears so. Given the circumstances, it's crucial for you to understand the full implications. There's a substantial sum of money that you are entitled to as well, without any conditions attached." Steve and Jessica exchanged worried glances. "Angela, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this," Steve said. "Jack's actions have been more than just reckless. They've been calculated." I took a deep breath, trying to process the gravity of what I'd just learned. The realization that Jack had been playing a long game with me to secure his inheritance felt like a punch to the gut. My marriage had been a facade, a means to an end. The meeting concluded with Mr. Harris outlining the next steps. I left the office feeling a mixture of anger and determination. I knew I had to confront Jack with this new knowledge and make some tough decisions about my future. That evening, as Jack stumbled into the house, reeking of alcohol, I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. I was tired of his excuses and empty promises. "Jack, we need to talk," I said firmly. "I know about the inheritance conditions and how you've been using me to secure it." He looked at me, a mix of surprise and guilt in his eyes. "Angela, No more excuses," I interrupted. "You've been deceitful from the start. The way you've manipulated me and used the foundation's money for your own pleasures, it's beyond forgiveness." Jack slumped into a chair, his face pale. "Angela, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could manage everything without dragging you into it." "Manage?" I said, my voice rising. "You've been living a double life, Jack. And now, it's clear that the only reason you stayed in this marriage was for the money." Jack's expression shifted from guilt to anger. "So, what if I stayed for the money? It's not like you've been perfect either. You've been holding me back." His words stung, but I was resolute. This marriage was supposed to be about trust and commitment. Instead, it's been nothing but a charade. I can't stay here any longer. He looked desperate now. "Angela, please don't do this. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through it." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. I'm done being a pawn in your game. I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm leaving you behind." Jack's attempts to plead with me were futile. I had reached the breaking point. That night, I packed up my things and prepared to leave. As I walked out of the house, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. It was the end of a chapter one had hoped would be filled with love and happiness, but instead, it had been marred by betrayal and deceit. In the days that followed, I focused on putting my life back together. I sold the house and started looking for a new place to live. My career as a jacketing consultant kept me busy, and I poured my energy into rebuilding my life. Despite the emotional turmoil, I found solace in my friends and the support they offered. Jessica was a constant source of encouragement, and Steve's understanding helped me navigate the aftermath of my broken marriage. As I settled into my new apartment, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. The experience had been painful, but it had also strengthened my resolve to value myself and not accept anything less than genuine respect and love. The weeks following my decision to leave Jack were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. As I settled into my new apartment, the weight of my old life began to lift, though the scars of betrayal still lingered. My focus was now on moving forward and finding my own path. One morning, as I was unpacking boxes, my phone buzzed with a message from Steve. It read, "Angela, can we meet? There's something important I need to discuss with you." I agreed to meet him at a local cafe, where we had often gathered to talk. When I arrived, Steve and Jessica were already seated, their expressions serious but supportive. "Angela, there's been more fallout from the situation with Jack," Steve began, his voice steady. "The misuse of the foundation's funds has caused a lot of trouble. I'm working to sort things out, but it's been a mess." Jessica added, "It detailed the final settlement of the inheritance. The letter confirmed that, as part of the divorce settlement, I would receive a substantial amount of money, though not the $17 million Jack had forfeited. It was a significant sum that would provide a solid foundation for my future." The letter also included a note from Jack, which I hesitated to read. It was a brief apology, expressing remorse for his actions and wishing me well. I wasn't sure what to make of it. While it was a small gesture, it did little to change the hurt he had caused. Still, I appreciated the attempt at closure. My friends and family continued to be my pillars of strength. With their support, I was able to navigate the complexities of the divorce and the emotional aftermath. I also took the opportunity to explore new interests and hobbies, rediscovering parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the tumultuous relationship with Jack. As months passed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I began volunteering for causes I was passionate about, finding fulfillment in giving back to the community. The experience of my past relationship had taught me the value of integrity and self-respect, and I was determined to live by those principles. I also took time to reflect on the lessons I had learned. The destructive impact of unresolved childhood trauma and resentment had been a harsh reality, but it had also highlighted the importance of recognizing one's worth and standing up for oneself. I realized that true love and respect could only come from a place of honesty and self-awareness. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, but I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. I was no longer defined by the past or by the betrayal I had experienced. With a renewed sense of hope and determination, I embraced the future with open arms. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and I was ready to explore them. My story with Jack had ended, but my life was far from over. The lessons learned and the strength gained would guide me as I embarked on a new chapter, one where I would cherish my self-respect and integrity above all else.